King of the Hill is a classic, one of the greatest sitcoms of all times, created by Mike Judge and Greg Daniels. The show aired on Fox Network from 1997 to 2010 and has a total of 259 episodes, making it 13 seasons in total. The show has become widely famous for its humor and made a spot for itself in a lot of memes that we see today. With that said, let's get right into it. But first, some context. The show is about the life of Hank Hill, a husband, father, and propane salesman who lives in Arlen, Texas. Hank's wife is Peggy Hill, a supportive woman, a teacher by profession. Bobby Hill, the son of Hank, a bit odd but somewhat unique, and all in all a good-hearted guy. And then we have Luann Platter, a sweet girl who lives at Hank's place. Frank also has 4 neighbors with whom he interacts: Dale Gribble, Bill Dauterive, Boomhauer, and Con. Dale, Hank's best friend, a weirdo who loves conspiracy theories. Bill, a close friend who is lonely and has a troubled life. Boomhauer, a friend who is loyal and caring, but he speaks so fast that sometimes he's difficult to understand. And Con, the neighbor who frequently clashes with Hank. The story opens up with Hank going to the room of his son, Bobby, and finds him listening to something. This is where the legendary meme, "What you listening to, son?" came from. After a while, they go to attend Bobby's basketball match, where Bobby gets hit by a ball in his eye. Somehow, rumors spread in town that Hank beat up his son, so a social worker, Anthony Page, is sent off to examine the case. After arriving, he asks a bunch of questions and comes to a conclusion that Hank definitely scolds his son. We also find out about Hank's narrow urethra, and his wife also says something about his baby batter count, but he shuts her up. Bobby starts being mischievous because his dad can't do anything to him. He causes a lot of trouble for his dad. Bobby picks up a call from the Child Protective Services officer, and they tell him that the case is now dismissed. But Bobby hides it and continues to do mischievous things. Ultimately, his mother finds out that he had hid this important notice and tells it to his dad, but being supportive, she wants him to tell Bobby that he loves him. He has a talk with Bobby, as awkward as it is, and tells him that he loves him, but in a special way. And after this, they start fighting. The episode concludes with Anthony Page seeing Hank beating up his son again. Honestly though, if I had a son like that, I would beat the shit out of him. Yeah, I mean, domestic violence is really, really bad. Moving forward to the next episode, Bobby returns from his school with a permission slip for sex education. Hank and Peggy decide that they'll teach him about the facts of life themselves. Peggy tries to talk to him, but when he mentions his ding-dong, she becomes embarrassed and leaves. Then Hank tries to teach him by taking him to a farm, but he gets shocked when he sees the new, modern way of how cows get pregnant. Then Hank and Peggy decide that it is best that teachers should teach him. But the teacher resigns after anonymous death threats from Dale, and Peggy is chosen as the new teacher of sex education. She starts preparing herself by reading books and is actually very unsure that she will really be able to talk to them about it. Dale also tries to threaten Peggy but fails. The news of Peggy being the new sex education teacher spread around in public, and everyone started making fun of Hank's family. In fact, one of Bobby's classmates, Stuart Dooley, tells Bobby that they're going to see his mom topless. Even Hank also avoids his wife after getting fed up. He tells Peggy he won't sign the permission slip. The next day, Peggy goes to take the class, and Hank takes Bobby to work, where he keeps asking about his mother, so Hank ultimately drops him off at the class. Peggy asks students to show the permission slip, but it's revealed that nobody's parents gave permission for it, so everyone leaves except Bobby. The episode ends with Peggy coming home and having a romantic dance with Hank. Catching up to the episode Luann's Saga, Luann tells Hank that she'll soon move to her boyfriend's place. Finally, after a while, her boyfriend, Buckley, comes and takes her with him on his motorcycle. Later that day, Luann returns home and it is revealed that her boyfriend broke up with her. Hank tells her to let her emotions out so she can feel better. He promises her to find a new boyfriend for her in 48 hours. Wow. Hank, with his wife and buddies, takes Luann to Ugly's salon, where Hank finds Wade, an all-American young football player. Hank tells Luann to make her shot at him, and leaves with Peggy after that. When they reach home, Buckley arrives and says he wants to patch things up with Luann, but Hank tells him she has a new boyfriend now. Later that night, Luann arrives with her new boyfriend. And now here's the twist. The boyfriend is none other than Hank's homeboy, Boomhauer. Luann even kisses Boomhauer on his cheek, which makes Hank furious and angry. She tells Hank that after he left, Wade turned into a weirdo, and Boomhauer protected him. Hank tells her that Boomhauer is a no-good, immoral, skirt-chasing rascal. Luann moves to Boomhauer's place after telling Hank that he is not her father and he can't control her. Hank starts organizing his den of Luann's belongings. Peggy plans for them to both end up at Luli's restaurant at the same time. Without anyone knowing it was her idea, Hank tells Luann to come and take her things from the house, but finds her stuff in a more clean way. She starts crying and tells Hank that she loves him. The episode concludes with Boomhauer and Hank making up and repairing their friendship. In the episode West East Side Story, a Laotian family moves in next to Hank's house. Hank decides to be friendly and goes to say hi. Con meets Hank and introduces his wife, Ming, and their daughter, Connie, aka Con Jr. Con tells they moved from Laos to California and lived there for 20 years. Peggy invites them over for dinner. Upon leaving, Ming makes a disrespectful comment about Peggy, saying that her feet are huge. I mean, she's got a point though. The next day, Con's dog, Doggy, tries to mate Hank's dog. Hank tells Con that his dog should breed with their own kind. And on this, Con says that Hank is a narrow-minded redneck. After a while, Min apologizes to Peggy for last night and invites her to their barbecue party. At the party, Hank eats a burger and likes it a lot, but after some misunderstanding, he concludes that the meat in the burger is from his dog. While Connie and Bobby are out with the dogs and going along well, unlike their parents. When Hank finds his dog missing, he demands Con to return his dog. However, Connie and Bobby return and tell them they are the reason why dogs are missing, and they get shouted at by their parents. Ultimately, the dogs come back to their houses, so Con and Hank make up, and the episode ends. In the episode Plastic White Female, Joseph invites Bobby to a co-party. He feels social anxiety after realizing his school's girls are intimate with him. He tells his father he's not going to attend the party. The next day, Bobby steals Luann's mannequin head and starts talking, dancing, and spending time with the head to cure his anxiety. But the next day, Peggy comes home and catches Bobby making out with the head. Hank takes his son on a drive and talks about it and comes up with the solution of locking the head in a cabinet. But Bobby still tries to steal it at night. Hank catches him and cuts the head in half. Luann screams because the head was for her beautician exam. The next day, she takes Hank as the replacement plastic head, and at first she gets an F grade. But after Hank tells them that he's satisfied with the haircut Luann gave him, Luann's teacher, Miss Kremser, praises her and apologizes. At home, Bobby is trying to kiss the dog now, but his mom catches him again. Damn, somebody's gotta stop this dude. Now he's going to attend the party, and while on his way, he meets Connie, and they decide to kiss each other for practice. At the party, Dale and Nancy arrive, and the spinning bottle stops towards Nancy. The episode ends with Bobby jumping to kiss Nancy. In the first episode of the season 2, Hank buys an expensive rifle for Bobby after he sees the potential for shooting in him. The duo goes to a clubhouse shooting range where Bobby once again shows excellent shooting skills. Hank feels excited and wants a father-son competition now. But he remembers his past trauma with his father. This affects him psychologically and his skills become worse. Hank tries to discourage Bobby's interest in shooting, but fails, ultimately taking him to a clubhouse where he meets Philip Nye, a psychologist who gives him his card. Later, Hank lies and says guns are dangerous and he isn't going to practice. He goes to the psychologist and he helps him recover his mental state. The day of the tournament arrives and Bobby and Hank perform well until Hank's father, Cotton, arrives. Even after this, he tries his best, and Bobby is really happy when he and his dad got a second place certificate. Moving forward to the episode Halloween, Luann attends a Bible studying meeting while Hank with his friends is building a haunted house for the local school. A new member joins the Bible meeting, Junie Harper, an outspoken member of the church. She tells everyone that Halloween is an evil event, and in actuality is a holiday for witches and Satanists. Luann tells this to Hank and family, but Hank yells at her. She goes to Junie and shares her experience. Junie tells Luann she's organizing a Hallelujah house as an alternative to haunted house. Luann mentions Bobby's school is doing a haunted house, so Junie threatens to sue the principal, Carl Moss, for mixing religion with school activities. With no other option, Moss cancels the haunted house. Peggy gives the idea they should do the haunted house in their garage. At night, Bobby and Hank go out to throw things at people's houses. They find Junie's house and throw things, but eventually get caught. Junie even calls the police, and she comes to Hank's residence where Hank accepts everything. She quotes Bible, "The complacency of fools will destroy them," Proverbs, to which Hank replies, "Get out of my house," Exodus. Next day, a law passes which says Halloween is banned now. Luann finds Bobby blaming himself for all of this, where she convinces him that he isn't at fault. It's just that his dad is a Satanist, and Bobby believes her. She takes her to Junie at the night of Halloween when Peggy gets to know about it, and she yells at Luann, and then tells Hank about it. Hank dresses up as Satan and starts roaming around in the streets shouting trick or treat. His friends, even Luann, and eventually everybody join him. He goes to Junie to take his son back. He offers his son Candy to come with him, but Bobby says that he just wants to spend time with his father. He doesn't want Candy, showing how much he loves Hank. Catching up to the next episode, in a garden, Bobby and Hank are digging for worms for fishing, when he catches a guy stealing his truck. He puts the culprit under citizen's arrest. After the trial, Hank goes to retrieve his truck but finds it disassembled by the police. Who were searching for hidden drugs. After coming home, Luann tells Hank that she can arrange his truck. Hank, who loves his truck so much, feels broken and decides to go fishing. At fishing, everyone catches fish except Hank, so he goes to buy a new bait at a mart. The owner of the shop tells him to go to Jack, a guy who sells good homemade bait. Hank tries to find him on the streets, but ultimately finds a suspicious guy and asks him for the bait. He ends up giving him crack cocaine. Hank still uses it as bait, and fish starts coming towards Hank. His friends get shocked and find out the secret of his new bait. Later, Hank really starts loving fishing, and he also starts keeping the bait safe from his friends because it works so well. Dale even tries to break into the Hill's garage to steal the bait, but Hank scares him off with a running weed trimmer. Hank goes out fishing the next day again, but sees that fish aren't taking the bait anymore. Dale tells him that it's the nature of fish. They become bored with the same bait again and again, so Hank should get something stronger. Hank goes to that dealer again and asks him for something strong. Dale also follows him, but the police appear to catch them all. At court, Hank tries to prove his innocence and tells the judge that he was using the cocaine without knowing it. He thought it was bait for fish. The judge asks Hank to prove his innocence by catching a fish with cocaine in the presence of police. The next day, Hank tries but fails, and after many hours, he cheats and catches a fish with a worm. The episode concludes with him being freed as innocent. In the next episode, The Wedding of Bobby Hill, Boomhauer leaves town to meet a woman and wants to make Bill in charge of his house, but Hank convinces him that his son would be a better option. By the way, many fans believe that Bill is the real father of Bobby because of Hank's sexual problems and sperm count. Bill looks at Bobby angrily. When Bobby wonders why Bill is looking at them like that, Hank says that Bill is proud of Bobby. Bobby meets Luann's new boyfriend, Rad, a flashy, arrogant, smooth talker. He befriends Bobby, and Bobby tells him about Boomhauer's empty house. Rad throws an industry party and calls his friends. Eventually, Luann gets to know that Rad didn't tell this to Boomhauer. She breaks up with him furiously and tells Hank about it. Hank kicks everyone outside the house, including Bobby. Hank and his wife take over Bobby's job of being in charge of the house. Bobby blames Luann for all of it, and they start doing pranks on each other. At last, Bobby hides her birth control pills with Candy, and she finds this out but plays along by telling him that if a woman doesn't take her pills, she'll get pregnant. Luann tells Hank and Peggy about Bobby and clarifies that she wasn't pregnant or anything, and the parents decide to teach Bobby a lesson by arranging a fake marriage. On the wedding day, after Luann finishes her vows and Bobby struggles with his words, Bill accepts it as a vow, and Bobby faints. They prank Luann too by telling her that she's legally married to Bobby because Bill is a licensed minister and she has to wait 1 year to apply for a divorce. Luann runs off after this, which makes Hank and Peggy laugh. In the end, Bill tells the truth, but Bobby and Luann happily share their wedding cake and apologize for their earlier mean pranks. Luann warns Bobby not to ride his bike because she removed its brakes. Moving forward to the episode, John Vitti presents Return to La Grunta. Hank gives his niece Luann a loan of $60, but she quickly spends it all, so Hank recommends her to apply for the job of the drink girl at the La Grunta Hotel, and she agrees. After checking out the job, she likes her job and decides to give her uncle a thank you gift. Later that evening, she surprises her uncle with a gift of a dolphin encounter card. Hank tries it and likes it at first, but after some time, the dolphin, Duke, attacks him. The hotel directors explain that Hank was sexually attracted to the dolphin. That's why the dolphin tried to make love with him. The hotel management gives Hank free merchandise so he won't sue them. Hank tells Luann not to tell anyone about this incident, but he gets traumatized from time to time. At the hotel, Luann gets harassed by a golfer, and she tells Hank and Bobby about this. The next day, Luann does proper dressing to stay away from these incidents. Peggy feels that something is fishy, so she asks Hank what's wrong. Hank opens up and eventually tells his friends as well about the dolphin incident. Everyone laughs at him first, but then Bill breaks down and tells them that he also got attacked by a dolphin. Hank becomes confident and decides to return to Murch and take action so no one will go through this again. He goes there and returns everything, and he encounters the golfer harassing Luann again. He grabs him and throws him in the pool where he gets abused by the dolphin. In the end, Dolphin goes back to the sea, and Luann tells Hank that she has sold his video of getting abused by Duke for money. In Take Me Out of the Ball Game, Bobby and Connie officially start dating when everyone in the school starts considering them as boyfriend and girlfriend because of their closeness. In the end, Connie officially calls him boyfriend and they start going out. Then season 4 opens with Peggy skydiving, and during skydiving, her parachute doesn't open correctly and she fails to land properly. She survives with only a broken back. Meanwhile, Bobby is with Diddy, the second wife of Cotton, who's having a baby. Damn, somebody stop this old geezer Cotton. Bobby drives her to the hospital, and while she screams in pain, the hospital members think that Bobby is the father of the child. She's taken to the same hospital where Bobby is with Diddy, where she is now in a full body cast. She shows happiness from outside, but is sad from the inside after getting a near-death experience. Cotton finally meets his child, names him GH, short for Good Hank, and gives him the title of Nazi-killing soldier. Meanwhile, Hank blames himself, thinking he encouraged her to do it. GH is going through a state where his nipples are lactating. Cotton thinks he committed a sin, and he's atoning for his sins by having a son like him. Peggy goes home, still in that full body cast, and invites Cotton, GH, and Diddy until they get better. Peggy tries to adjust her life in a full body cast, while Hank and Bobby find it hard to look after her and the baby. Peggy gets an emotional meltdown when Hank mistakenly gives her baby formula instead of eggs. She admits she jumped out of the plane because she was jealous of Diddy's pregnancy. Bobby takes on caring for the baby and shows how mature and resourceful he is. Peggy even plays with the baby with her toes. In the end, even with difficulties, the family sticks together. Peggy feels better knowing she can still comfort the baby even with her cast. They find a moment of peace and gratitude in the midst of everything. Dale proudly shows his new unbreakable trash can to the guys in the alley. Min and Khan go on a trip to Hawaii, and they leave their daughter Connie at Hill's residence because her nanny couldn't watch her. Bobby becomes excited that his girlfriend is staying over at his house. He even asks Boomhauer what he should wear and ends up wearing Ninja Turtle pajamas. Khan and Min leave and everything goes well, and Connie feels at home. But the next day, she starts behaving a little differently and weirdly. She starts to get angry at everyone, especially Bobby. Hank tries to take her to school, where he finds out that Connie had her first period. Hank is in panic and takes her to the hospital and then to the mart to buy products for her. At home, they become relaxed, and Connie asks Hank how to use them. Hank panics again, and he calls Min, Khan, Peggy, his own mother, and in the end, even 911, who informs Peggy about this at school. Peggy rushes home quickly and even hits Dale's trash can. Peggy contacts her parents and tries to tell Bobby about his girlfriend situation, but he doesn't understand and storms off at his girlfriend. Khan, with his wife, returns, takes his daughter back, and tells Hank he's lucky he didn't sue him. Connie cries at her home for behaving badly with Bobby, while Bobby thinks his girlfriend wants to break up with him. Meanwhile, Dale and his friends eagerly wait for their first trash pickup with the new trash can. However, the mechanism on the trash truck fails and grabs the trash can instead of trash and drives off. Boomhauer chases it and threatens to call 911. Eventually, they talk and Connie apologizes and they promise to make their relationship and bond stronger. In the episode Nancy Boys, Hank saves Mr. Winston, the owner of That's Amore, a romantic restaurant in Arlen. Mr. Winston invites him and offers him to invite 3 more people with him. Peggy and Hank decide to go, and Dale tells Hank he will be coming with his wife, Nancy. Dale goes to tell his wife about this, but finds his wife with John Redcorn. She was obviously cheating, but Dale somehow doesn't realize it. Nancy wants John to stay with her, but he says that he wants some time alone. Hank tells Peggy about it, and she reveals that Nancy doesn't sleep with her husband at all. Nancy, being hurt, spends time with Dale and later somehow sleeps with Dale. This causes her to break up with her cheating partner, Redcorn. Later in the episode, Nancy starts loving Dale, and Dale, being a generous guy, helps John with some paperwork and becomes friends. However, one day, Dale forgets his date with Nancy, and she, upset with Dale, goes to John again. She finds Dale there without his shirt, but explains that he was just helping John. John and Nancy end their relationship, and then Dale and Nancy leave together holding hands while Dale tells Nancy that John is kinda gay. At the end, Redcorn receives significant government papers, starting a new path in his life. Starts with Hank getting upset because Luann hasn't filled out the registration form for voting. The family then goes to a country fair, where Bobby saves a pig named Mitch from drowning, giving Hank an opportunity to meet George W. Bush, a presidential candidate. Among the crowd, Hank gets an opportunity to shake Bush's hand, but to his surprise, it's not firm at all. Considering all this, he decides to go shopping with Dale on voting day. Luann, who is supporting Parigi now, tries to contact Hank after finding this out. Hank eventually answers his pager, but is not convinced that he should vote. After talking to Hank, Luann thinks that voting isn't that important and that she shouldn't vote as well. Hearing this though, Hank comes back and votes. In the next episode, Hank is furious as Bobby is spending his summer vacations loafing around and forces him to get a job. He gets hired as Buck Strickland's personal caddy. While Hank starts to suspect some of Buck's ill intentions, Peggy and Min race to donate blood and win a mug. However, both are disqualified for being anemic. Peggy, determined to win a mug, donates in Houston and suffers severe consequences. Buck convinces Bobby that it's only cheating if you get caught. Hank, infuriated by all of this, orders Bobby to stop working for Buck or he'll be kicked out of the house. However, his plan backfires when Buck allows him to live under his roof. Bobby soon gets tired of Buck's wicked ways of living, quits his job, and lives with his own family. As Bobby's 13th birthday approaches, he visits his paternal grandmother, Tilly. Upon returning, he receives a major shock at seeing Joseph. His friend of the same age hit puberty first, having grown 6 inches in height with a deeper voice and a small mustache. At a restaurant, while Joseph is treated like an adult, Bobby is still treated like a little kid, which infuriates him. After returning home, Joseph faces many puberty-related problems, such as acne, he can't stop thinking about girls, and being bullied by Dale because of his height. At Bobby's birthday party, Joseph humiliates himself, and Bobby, trying to protect him, takes him to his room with Connie, where Bobby and Connie get into a fight and Connie leaves. Joseph, in order to make everything right, apologizes to Connie and they both kiss. Seeing this, Bobby beats Joseph. After getting home and getting bullied by Dale once more, Joseph takes Dale's car and tries to leave with Connie and Bobby before crashing into a lamppost. All 3 of them flee from the scene and all of them make up with each other. In the following episode, after hearing about the Native Americans, Bobby decides to boycott Thanksgiving. Despite John's attempts, Joseph shows no interest in Black history. Peggy, after finding out that people like to spin, makes a game of it known as Spin the Choice. John tries his best to make Joseph reclaim everything that natives ever owned. At Thanksgiving dinner, John tries to bring up the subject once again, but is stopped by Nancy. Bobby announces that Native Americans used to be cannibals and would eat people after wars, making Joseph hate natives and John even more. After hearing how much John has lost from Nancy, Joseph feels a little better. Later, Bill opens a Christmas village in his backyard and plays the role of Santa. He feels such pleasure from it that he decides to keep it up even after Christmas is over. His holiday spirit grabs the attention of a single mother. However, soon enough, she leaves him because of his plan to keep the Christmas village. Disappointed, Bill meets Wally, a teenage slacker. Looking at Bill's condition, Wally decides to use him to the fullest, making Bill buy alcohol, cigarettes, and other drugs. With the help of his friends, Bill finally learns the truth and kicks Wally out, who ends up in jail after getting caught buying things from Bill's credit cards. However, rather than sending him to jail, Bill convinces the judge to enlist Wally in the army. The Chasing Bobby episode starts with Hank having issues starting his beloved truck and him noticing that it's almost about time that he lets it go, which makes him very emotional. Hank finally takes his truck to a mechanic, who tells him that the cost it would take to fix the truck would far exceed what the truck is worth. Hank, in denial, decides that he's going to fix it himself, but fails. Meanwhile, Bobby reads about a new mechanic who, according to Bobby, could fix Hank's truck. Upon reaching the mechanic, it turns out to be a truck dealership. Hank, outraged by this, tries to go back when their truck suddenly turns off on a railroad track. Hank tries to fix it but fails, and the truck is crushed by the train. Even more angry now, Hank and Bobby return to the dealership where Hank tells Bobby to sit here and try not to break any more trucks, which makes Bobby feel humiliated, and he ends up going back home on foot, causing him to pass out on his way back. Hank, in order to find Bobby, tries a new truck and loves its new features. He picks Bobby up, apologizes to him, and Bobby tells him that he loved the old truck too. Later, Dale rents a convertible on Bill's birthday. Hank, in order to prove that he still has what it takes to have fun, takes on a dare and shows his bum through a glass elevator, which causes a mishap and the former Texas governor Ann Richards sees it. Scared, the friends hide in their room when they get a knock from the security. Bill takes on the blame, but to his surprise, she was cool with it, and the two of them develop a relationship. However, it doesn't go on for long as Bill's ex-wife gets involved with Bill once again. Meanwhile, Peggy and Bobby discover that charcoal grilled burgers taste better than propane cooked burgers. Hank, on arriving home, gets furious and asks them to choose between one charcoal burger or him. He means propane burgers. Peggy lies to him and tells him that propane burgers taste better. Hank is fed up with Tammy, a new employee at his company who makes so many plans that it ruins Hank's lunch with Peggy. Given no other choice, Peggy goes to lunch with Tammy. They soon become friends and Peggy offers Tammy her house to live in. It turns out that Tammy is a prostitute who hooks up regularly, introducing the guys as friends. She even gives Hank some money for keeping up with her. Later, she gives Hank a cowboy-style hat and a feather. Upon returning home, Hank notices some argument between Tammy and one of her customers, not knowing the reason Hank shows up wearing his hat and feather. The customer mistakes him for a pimp and pays Tammy up. Later, Hank meets Alabaster Jones, the main Mac Daddy, who introduces himself as Tammy's pimp. Hank finally puts all the pieces together and finds out that Tammy's using him as a pimp. Upon confrontation and having been chased by Alabaster, Tammy decides to go with him. But Hank puts up an act and tells Alabaster that Tammy is his hoe now. The Exterminator episode starts with Dale, instead of spraying the poison on rats, accidentally spraying it on himself. Upon reaching the hospital, he's being told to quit his job or he won't live until 50. He asks Hank who's his emergency contact to not tell Nancy, but Hank tells him that she already knows. This makes him change his emergency contact from Hank to Peggy. Upon reaching home, he finds out that Nancy has already sold half of his extermination equipment and asks him to get a different job. Hank helps him get a job at an adhesive company, which forces him to change a major portion of his appearance. While hating his new job, he overhears his boss having a hard time firing someone. After talking to him, Dale decides that he can easily get the job done and fires his coworker on the spot. Impressed by his boldness, Dale gets a new job of firing employees. Now overcome with pride, Dale abuses his power and threatens to fire any coworker who annoys him. He even threatens his own son, Joseph, to fire him from the family. After a bug infestation breaks through and Dale saves the day, he eventually realizes that his true job is being an exterminator. Dale convinces Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer to enter the Durndale County mower races. Hank, first hesitant, decides to participate. However, during practice, Hank experiences back pain. He visits a doctor who diagnoses him with diminished gluteal syndrome, a condition where he lacks muscle mass in his buttocks, and prescribes a gluteal orthotic to help him. Dale plays a prank with Hank's orthotics, leading to embarrassment for Hank. Peggy encourages him to join a support group for people with similar conditions. However, Hank decides to continue with the mower race despite the challenges. The race begins, and during the race, the orthotic malfunctions and Hank faces difficulties. Despite this, he continues with the encouragement from the support group, who cheer him on. Hank ends up losing the race, but the group appreciates his effort. The episode ends with Hank planning to participate in the mower race again the next year and expressing gratitude for the support from his friends in the group. In the next episode, Bobby is bullied by some high school students who force him to ditch his bicycle. Bobby, when he goes back to retrieve it, is spotted by the security guard who locks him into school. Instead of being scared, he's amazed to see it. While he is exploring, he meets some students who try to bully him but stop as he tells them that he has a kidney problem and is dying. The seniors tell him about No Doubt, performed in their school, in which bigger kids try to fit in a dishwasher and try to complete its washing cycles. Bobby agrees to enter the competition. While Bobby is busy with his new high school friends, Connie reminds him about the middle school proms and asks him to buy tickets, which he doesn't. Bobby tells his new friends that Connie is also a sick girl who he met in the hospital. On the day of the competition, Bobby wins it, but after it, his new friends decide to bully the middle school students. But as soon as they're about to hit some kids with water balloons, it turns out to be Connie. Bobby protects her and tells them that they both have been cured now and will start in middle school again. They splash water on Bobby too and leave. Later, they realize that he helped them win and give him a ticket to the senior prom. Bobby is getting bullied and being forced to eat dirt. Hank, after seeing this, decides to enroll him in a boxing class. However, all the classes are filled, so Bobby signs up for women's self-defense classes, where he learns just one move, the groin kick. To be fair, it is quite effective. Later at school, when Bobby is about to get bullied, he kicks the bully in the groin, making the others run away. Bobby finds out that he can now protect himself and even bully others. Hank, without knowing how, finds out that Bobby can protect himself. He gets really happy and appreciates him. However, when Hank finds out how Bobby won those fights, he decides to teach him himself. Telling Bobby that it might hurt, Hank starts beating Bobby. Overwhelmed by anger, Bobby kicks Hank in the groin and sends him to the hospital. Upon his return, at first Bobby feels ashamed of his actions, but this doesn't go on for long as he starts disobeying Hank. Peggy, tired from all this, tells Bobby to stop. He kicks her in the groin only to find out that it has no effect on her. Peggy then disciplines him and Bobby learns his lesson. In Soldier of Misfortune episode, Dale runs for president of the Arlen Gun Club. However, his chances of winning are looking slim as he accidentally fires his gun while telling a story. Hank, in order to help him gain his confidence, acts as Mr. Big and hires Dale as a private soldier and assigns him to pick up a random briefcase. Dale accidentally steals a briefcase from some random stranger. Dale is scared that he might be doing something illegal because Mr. Big plans to flee the country. Meanwhile, Mad Dog, Dale's competitor, holds a party in his house where Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer show up unannounced and are captured. Dale tries to help his friends but ends up getting captured too. It turns out Dale's suspicion was correct, and Mad Dog gets a knock on the door. Mad Dog, thinking that it's the CIA, flees from the scene. Dale unties everyone and helps them leave the property alive before it blows up. In the following episode, Peggy is thinking that she's fluent in Spanish and can speak Spanish better than Mexicans. She's then offered to act as a substitute teacher in a Spanish club going on a field trip to Mexico. Due to her terrible Spanish, she accidentally kidnaps a Mexican girl, Lupe, thinking that she's one of her students. After bringing her back, Peggy realizes her mistake and asks Lupe for her family's contact number, to which she replies in Spanish that her family doesn't own a phone. Peggy thinks that Lupe doesn't want to go back and decides to give her love. After a while, when Hank finds out about Lupe, he tells Peggy to take her back, which she does. However, she's contacted by the police upon her arrival for kidnapping. In court, her lawyers asks her to plead her own case. The judge, after listening to Peggy's Spanish, learns about how she mistook her and decides to drop the case. Later, Bobby gets so sick that he can't even hold hands with Connie either at school or at her home because of Con. Con, in order to keep Bobby away from Connie, bribes him. When Bobby tells Connie about this, she becomes infuriated. They trick Con into thinking that they broke up, only to use the bribe money to spend time together. Connie tricks Con into thinking that she's depressed and wants to kill herself. Con, in order to keep his daughter alive, tells Connie that she can date Bobby and helps them get together by arranging double dates. However, after spending time together, they both realize that they aren't meant for each other and get into a fight. After the fight, Connie's mother tells her about how she met Con. This makes Connie break up with Bobby, but they promise to still be friends. During all this, Dale starts a 24-hour radio channel and covers conspiracy theories. In the end, he ends up selling it. Sometime later, Connie is playing her violin and Hank is listening to it. Hank says to Peggy and Bobby that Connie is a natural. Although she wants to play Blue Moon of Kentucky, she's being forced to play Mozart. Hank and his best friends decide to help her play Blue Moon, and they trick Con into thinking that she's at Fort Worth playing Mozart. However, Con figures it out and goes to Fort Worth. Connie thinks that Hank is being strict as Con runs away from the performance. While Hank tries to find them, he bumps into Con. Upon confrontation, Con badmouths Bobby, upon which Hank tells him that Bobby sold a joke. Bobby, Connie, Con, and Hank together start a street performance and they enjoy it. The substitute Spanish prisoner episode starts with Peggy being unable to answer a question and questioning her intelligence. She decides to take an online IQ test as she has never actually taken one before. She uses the Intelligent Institute of Texas website. The results come out and it turns out she's a genius. She gets an invitation to a dinner where she may purchase an official institute registry of the 150 smartest people in Texas. Hank suspects it to be a scam, but Peggy ignores his warning and attends the party where she's offered a PhD degree for $999. Peggy spends her retirement money on it without even consulting Hank. The next day, Peggy finds out about the scam when Luann scores a genius too. She tries to get her money back but is refused, so she tricks Zosa at the institute and steals her money back. In the next episode, Dale is sneaking into a top secret military base and finds out that the government experimented on Bill's body, and that's why a former high school football player winds up going bald and flabby. Infuriated, Bill storms out and steals a military truck. After talking to Hank and Boomhauer, he feels a bit better and returns the tank, only to place it in an artillery exercise range, which he barely survives. Bill meets his friends, who tell him that he wasn't actually injected with any drugs but actually sugar water, which disappoints him even further as he finds out that everything that happened to him was his own fault. Hank is installing a hole in his backyard as all of the other public golf courses were filled. Hank gets an offer to be a guest at Nine Rivers Country Club and play there. He plays so well that he's been offered membership there, and Hank gets a little suspicious about getting a membership at an all-Asian club, but is told that ethnicity doesn't matter. He gets a warm welcome there. Hank feels even more suspicious as Khan, who is with him, isn't given the same treatment. Hank, after finding out that he's not really wanted there, says that it was just a formality as they had to add someone non-Asian to the club, and he ends up refusing the membership. In Beer and Loathing episode, Peggy is getting hired to work for Alamo Beer because she can speak Spanish. She signs a non-disclosure agreement not to disclose any of the company's secrets. She soon discovers that some soap went inside the Alamo beer, causing people to go sick. She talks to her supervisor, but she ignores her. Without disclosing any secrets, she warns Hank not to drink any beer, but he drinks anyways behind her back, making Peggy feel betrayed. But once they get sick, she tells Hank the real reason. In order to save everyone and make Alamo Beer bring its products back, Peggy first talks to her supervisor. When she gets no result, she replaces the normal beer with the ones in the executive room, forcing the company to bring all the beer back, saying it's defective. The next episode starts with Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer deciding to track down Bug, Dale's father, who's planning on renewing his wedding vows. They find him at a rodeo. However, he turns out to be gay. They try to bring him back but are interrupted by his boyfriend, Juan Pedro, who's upset after finding about Bug's son. Unsure at first, Dale reconciles with his father. Bug tells Nancy about him being gay. Dale suspects that Bug has some feelings towards Nancy. Unable to clarify the misunderstanding, Dale suspects that his father is a government spy. He tries to embarrass Bug at his rodeo, but Juan Pedro shows up and kisses him, confirming his claim of being gay. In returning Japanese episode, Cotton looks at some war pictures and storms out. Hank suggests that Redcorn's healing spa could help Cotton. They go into the steam room where all of them start hallucinating. Cotton sees all of the World War II soldiers that he killed coming to kill him. Bobby catches Cotton looking at a picture of some Japanese woman in his wallet, to which Cotton tells him that she's a widow and that Cotton would like to apologize to the family. Peggy talks to her editor and gets a free trip to Japan. Once they get to Japan, Hank sees Cotton looking nervous. Hank consoles him a bit, but as he's about to shake his hand, he notices that something is wrong as Cotton has dyed his hair and room service brings flowers. Hank realizes that the woman from the wallet isn't a widow, but a woman Cotton wants to sleep with. Furious, Hank leaves the room. Later, Cotton comes to his room and asks for a family picture. Thinking that Cotton might have good intentions, Hank follows him only to find some Japanese dude who looks exactly like Hank, but Japanese. They both scream simultaneously. The second part starts with Hank confronting Cotton, saying that he had another family and kept it a secret from them, to which he tells them how he met Michiko, the woman from the wallet. He tells them that Michiko was a Japanese nurse who helped him during his time in World War II. He tells Hank that it was a love at first sight, and they had both fallen completely for each other before Cotton was forcefully transferred back to the States. Back at the hotel, Hank is happy to know that he has a brother. Cotton and Hank try to bond with Junichiro, Hank's half-brother, and Michiko. The conversation is going smoothly, but then Cotton apologizes to Junichiro for leaving him alone, to which he replies that he'll never forgive Cotton. This enrages him, and Cotton says that he's going to redeclare war on Japan. The next day, Hank asks for Junichiro's help to find Cotton, as he seems to have gone to wage another war by spitting on the Emperor's face. At first, there is a bit of miscommunication between the brothers as they have nothing in common, but they eventually bond and find Cotton, who is sitting in a bullet train. Junichiro stops Cotton in the nick of time, saying that his father is a war hero and he forgives it. Meanwhile, Bobby falls in love with a Japanese schoolgirl and has a final dance at the arcade with her before they leave. Hank is listening to Bobby's music choice and ending up liking it. He takes Bobby, Joseph, Connie, and Connie's friend Jordan Bronson from the Learning Center to a concert where he dislikes the inappropriate dancing and brings Bobby back home. Hank, wanting to give Bobby a wholesome childhood, tries to control him. Jordan's parents allow her to have a co-ed slumber party. Although Bobby wants to go, Hank tells him not to, but with secret help from Peggy, he goes there anyway. At the party, they play the game 7 Minutes in Heaven, where Jordan and Bobby have to make out in a closet. However, Hank notices that Bobby's missing, shows up at the party, stops all the inappropriate actions, and ends up playing with the kids. Meanwhile, Nancy and Min are ranking the rizzness of men in their neighborhood. Hank and Bobby are tied for the last place, but after hearing how Hank saved the day, his riz gets raised a bit. In the next episode, Hank falls through a two-way intersection tunnel that Dale has dug through his house to Hank's. The city inspector shuts down the Hill house and calls it unfit for habitation. Hank, being forced to live with Dale, accidentally cuts Dale's fingers off while cutting a tree with a chainsaw. Dale, thinking that it was on purpose, sues Hank, and Hank is forced to attend anger management classes. Meanwhile, the remaining friends dug a tunnel from each of their houses and even made a path to get beer cans. However, it's unsafe. Hank sees a garbage truck and figures out that the tunnel can't hold its weight and that it'll kill his friends. In order to save them, he eventually ends up shouting, to which his friends come out, getting saved seconds before the tunnel collapses. In Full Metal Dust Jacket episode, Peggy is getting rejected by the ladies' book club. Peggy buys the bookstore from which all the members bought books, only to find out that books are not a hot item in the Arlen economy. Dale starts to sell firearms in his store and tells the cops that it's part of a free giveaway. He even pays Peggy for lending him her space. Eventually, Peggy goes to a book club meeting only to make a fool out of her and come across as an idiot. She later finds out that the members of the book club don't go to talk about the books. She also finds out that Dale's customers, to whom she'd been giving free books, actually read those, and she ends up making her own book club with Dale's customers. The episode Megalo Dale starts with Dale getting fired from his job, and Hank, with his reputation on the line, helps him get a job at Megalomart for exterminating rats. However, he suspects that it's not rats, but rather Chuck Mangione. Hank, Bill, and Boomhauer head to the mall to get rid of the rats. The group notices that the phone lines have been cut, along with the doors getting shut. Finally, Dale meets the culprit, who turns out to be Chuck, which proves his instincts were right all along. Chuck tells his depressing story and lets the gang go. Meanwhile, Peggy and Bobby play a game of Don't Spill the Beans, where Bobby cheats and places the beans in his nose, causing him to end up in a hospital. Peggy, furious by this, tells him that he now has to play the game with the removed beans. On another day, Bobby disobeys Hank, and upon Cotton's suggestion, Hank ends up sending him to a boot camp. Cotton tells Hank to send him to the boot camp where Cotton used to go, but to his surprise, it's not as cruel as it used to be. Furious, Cotton gets in charge of the boot camp, fired, and brings back all the past traditions. However, Bobby is still unfazed by this. This surprises Cotton, and he sends him to the hole. Hank, on hearing about this, drives to the boot camp and retrieves Bobby, who's still happy. Upon asking, he says that he stayed in the hole longer than Cotton. Cotton laughs at this and says that if Bobby had been back in the old times, World War II would have ended within 3 days. Sometime later, Bobby becomes a salesperson at Strickland Propane. Instead of teaching the customers how to properly use the grill, he engages in fun conversations and eventually ends up selling the grills. He keeps this up and ends up having the most sales, breaking the record for Hank. However, this doesn't go on for long, as Bobby gets tons of complaints as none of the customers knew how to operate the grill. Thankfully, Hank comes and saves the day, reclaiming his title of most sales. Later, Hank is annoyed by Bill's way of living as he ends up giving the boys lice. Hank ends up ignoring Bill. Bill, depressed from all this, starts drinking publicly, only to end up getting spotted by a police officer who arrests him. Later, in order to get rid of the lice, Hank ends up shaving his head, only to find out Bill's name tattooed at the back of his head. Confused, he asks his friends how he got it, to which he finds out that Bill once protected him, and in his honor, Hank got the tattoo. Hank, however, removes the tattoo and goes to save Bill, but he is not allowed to leave as Bill tries to falsely take the blame for some crimes that he didn't commit, only to stay with his new friends. Hank gets arrested to help Bill and tells him about everything, and they both end up being friends again. The Night and Deity episode starts with a pigeon infestation breaking through. After Dale fails, he calls Sheila, a beautiful pigeon girl of the Heimlich County. Nancy, threatened by her beauty, tells Dale to stay away from her, but Dale brings up the name of John Redcorn, causing Nancy to look ashamed. Later, when Dale and Sheila head out for their extermination date at a motel, Dale apologizes, saying he's married, and goes back home. Meanwhile, Hank acts as Luann's designated driver to a bar, who ends up getting Hank drunk, making out with some random stranger in front of the car with Hank sleeping in the back. Hank wakes up and screams in protest. In the episode Patch Boomhauer, Boomhauer's brother shows up and announces that he is getting married to Catherine, a girl with whom Boomhauer had always been in love with. At his bachelor party, as soon as the strippers appear, everyone suspects that it's Boomhauer who called them, trying to sabotage his brother's marriage. On the day of marriage, Hank confronts him about the strippers, only to find out it wasn't him, and upon confrontation, Patch tells that it was he who actually called the strippers, causing Catherine to leave him. Catherine leaves the next day, saying goodbye to Boomhauer and telling him that she still has feelings for him. The episode ends with Boomhauer asking Hank to be the best man at his marriage if he ever gets married, to which Hank replies that he'd be honored. In the next episode, Hank is stressed from work. Peggy joins a planning committee for an event, including a running with the bulls activity, while Bobby is struggling in PE, so Hank takes him to the doctor. The doctor suggests testosterone therapy for Hank as he fits the description perfectly, but he refuses to get the treatment. Peggy secretly adds testosterone to Hank's meals, making him energetic but also aggressive. When Peggy confesses, Hank feels disappointed but continues training for the bull run despite feeling tired. On the day of the event, Bobby confesses that his reason for being weak in PE is because he's embarrassed to take showers with other kids. Bobby hopes that Hank will forfeit because he feels weak. However, Hank chooses to run, facing the challenges with honesty. Later, Hank's mom, Tilly, is getting some old furniture from inheritance, but needs help moving it from Arlen to Arizona. So Hank rents an 18-wheeler truck and takes Bobby with him, leaving the Rainy Street men. But Dale, Bill, and Boomhauer sneak inside the truck. While going through the desert, they face many truck-related problems. Bobby convinces Hank not to give up. They navigate through tricky mountain turns and successfully get the truck running again. Along the way, some truckers help them and they successfully deliver the furniture, celebrating Christmas all together. The episode ends with a Christmas party at Tilly's house. Later, Luann decides to become a hairstylist and Bill is helping her study for her state board exam, as she needs to pass it. They get jobs at a salon called Hottie's, but they face challenges when the owner learns Bill is straight. After this, Bill pretends to be gay and Luann adopts a sexier style. Eventually, they get promoted. Soon, Bill gets frustrated and reveals that he is straight. Collett, owner of Hottie's, fires Bill but allows Luann to stay. Luann initially doesn't support Bill, but later stands up for him, resulting in both of them getting fired. With Hank's help, they find new jobs at Jack's salon, where they continue their hairstyling adventures. The episode ends with them happily working at Jack's salon. On another day, Hank suffers from back injuries at work, leaving him unable to perform basic tasks. When he files for workers' compensation, his claim is doubted due to photos showing his seemingly healthy moments. Hank turns to yoga, and surprisingly, it really helps him. To prove his case in court, he relies on his weird yoga instructor, Yogi Victor. During the trial, Hank cleverly argues that Yogi Victor's weirdness is proof of the treatment's authenticity. The court agrees, dropping the charges but requiring Hank to continue yoga until he is declared fully healed. Yogi Victor, in his style, demands Hank buy a tank top for ongoing treatment. Meanwhile, Peggy fights to keep the old Pink and White market open after being a champion bag girl. Despite her attempts, Pink and White is eventually bought out by Megalomart. And season 9 opens with Peggy's mom asking the family to come to her farm in Montana, but Peggy doesn't really want to go because she and her mom don't get along. Even though Hank thinks it could be a chance to fix things, the visit doesn't go well. The family has a problem with a trail that Henry Winkler owns, and it causes trouble for their cows. This makes their visit more difficult. While on the trip, Bobby becomes friends with a horse named Tennessee. Meanwhile, Peggy finds an old rule that says cows can go on Main Street. They think this might help with their trail problem. To fix the trail issue, the family decides to bring their cows through town using Main Street. It gets pretty crazy, and later, Peggy realizes that even though she saved the farm, her mother is still not proud of her. Well, welcome to being an adult. Peggy wonders if the entire trip was pointless, but Hank points to a nearby cliff, and the episode ends with them watching Bobby sitting on the horse watching the sunset. In the episode Yard She Blows, Peggy feels jealous because people always say nice things about Hank's yard, so she tries to make a garden in the front yard, but her plants keep dying, making their house look worse. Peggy gets frustrated, and Luann suggests going to a sale where Peggy buys a garden gnome named Winklebottom. Hank doesn't like garden gnomes and tries to hide Winklebottom, but a jogger named Sally likes it a lot. She tells Peggy about the garden gnomes and Peggy becomes interested. Bobby accidentally breaks Winklebottom's ear, but Hank lies and says it can't be fixed. Hank and Bobby try to get rid of the gnome by burying it in a forest. The next day, Peggy sees that Winklebottom is missing. Hank and Bobby lie about not knowing what happened. Peggy gets upset, thinking someone stole it. Hank tries to take the blame, pretending he hates gnomes. Peggy punishes Bobby, who suggests finding a new gnome. Hank goes to a tourist town to buy a gnome. He gets Figgleworth, but says it was Bobby's idea. Peggy is happy with Figgleworth and realizes it was Hank's fault that Winklebottom died. In the end of the episode, she makes up with Bobby and puts Figgleworth on display. Hank is glad Peggy wants to keep it inside. In Dale to the Chief episode, Hank receives his driver's license, but to his surprise, his gender is written female on it. He is furious and visits the DPS to fix it, but it's not fixed, and instead, the employees call him ma'am, which makes him even more mad. Meanwhile, Dale rereads the Warren Commission's report and is stunned to realize that maybe the government was right all along about who killed John F. Kennedy. He investigates and sees people spreading various rumors about him. He sits in despair when an officer comes up to him for help. Dale decides to abandon his anti-government ways and becomes a flag-waving patriot. When Hank visits DPS again, they ask him to get a medical checkup to confirm his gender. He reserves a doctor appointment, and the doctor says the results will come back in 2 to 4 weeks. Dale calls the FBI on Hank for defacing the American flag, and they both get into a fight. Hank gets nominated for Texas Propane Woman of the Year, and in rage, he decides to go to DPS one last time. In the end, Dale, feeling guilty, decides to help him and gets his gender changed to male. Moving on to the next episode, Dale has been surrounding his face, talking about making money with honey. Meanwhile, Bobby and Joseph are playing, but Bobby gets stuck under the garage door and breaks it. Bobby thinks insurance will get him a new bike, so Hank teaches him about how insurance works. Dale sells his little honey harvest at the farmer's market, and people want bee stings for natural treatment. Hank finds out his insurance is cancelled, making him upset. Peggy and Luann are stuck at a rest stop waiting for Hank, resorting to attacking the vending machine to end their hunger. Dale promotes bee sting therapy at the market. Panic happens when the delivery man brings bees to the Hills house. A fire starts when Bill drops a beer in the fryer. Dale uses bee stings to heal him, but it doesn't help. Hank helps Dale, puts out the fire, and realizes he influenced Bobby's fear. They take Dale to the hospital. Hank explains to Bobby about responsibility. At the end, Peggy calls about wanting to come home, but is interrupted by police detaining her over the broken vending machine. During a football game at Arlen High, the field is not taken care of, and groundskeeper Smitty might lose his job. To help him, Hank and his friends secretly fix the field at night without telling him. Luann starts dating Lucky, which worries Peggy. Peggy thinks Luann might go back to her chaotic life, but Luann doesn't listen. Hank saves Smitty's job, but Smitty becomes too proud. He accuses Hank and his friends of basic work when he finds out about their efforts and calls the police to kick them out. The next night, the field is ruined. Hank convinces Lucky to upset other truck owners and they mess up the field. The next day, they find a new place for the game and Smitty happily leaves. Lucky and the truck owners do community service for ruining the field. The episode concludes when Luann tells Lucky that Arlen won against Denton and Lucky is happy to have her with him. The next episode begins when Hank, Dale, Bobby, and Joseph go to a shopping center. There, Dale is asked to put out his cigarette because of a new law. Dale starts noticing that his son doesn't respect him, so he asks Hank about it, and Hank just suggests him to be a man. At night, Dale goes to the Waffle House to smoke, but the waitress asks him to stop. This time, he shouts at the waitress and leaves, creating a scene. Soon, he notices that Joseph looks up to the smoking bandit. Dale asks Joseph how he'd feel if it turned out that he was the smoking bandit. Joseph is uninterested. Joseph and Bobby follow the smoking bandit's footsteps in school and get suspended. Meanwhile, Hank and Dale decide to catch the bandit. Dale pretends to trap the smoking bandit inside a bar's restroom. Dale tells Hank that they should let him go, and Hank realizes that Dale is the smoking bandit. At the end of the episode, Bobby and Joseph look up to Dale. Catching up to the next episode, Bobby signs up for a fun run at school, and Hank is excited that Bobby will be running 3 miles. On race day, Bobby struggles and quits early. Hank is disappointed in him. He gives Bobby a pedometer and asks him to walk 3 miles, but Bobby covers only half the distance. Hank is not happy with his effort and takes him to the school track, making him run laps. The boys' track team notices and lets Bobby join. Hank and Bobby are surprised, but they decide to give it a shot. Soon, Hank learns that Coach Palmer is using Bobby to embarrass other teammates. Coach Palmer warns the team that being snubbed by Bobby will be their punishment if they are caught slacking off. Hank tells Bobby about it, but Bobby sees it as motivation. The final race is about to start and no replacements are available. Coach Palmer is forced to use Bobby. The race begins and they get a large head start. Bobby is able to successfully grab the baton, but his slow speed allows the other runners to pass him. However, the faster runner trips and falls over one another, and this gives Bobby the chance to retake the lead. In the end, he is able to win the race, naming Tom Landry as the district champions. In the following episode, Bill's roof collapses, making him think he needs to find his life's purpose. Hank takes him to a church while Bill joins a singing group called the Harmonaholics. Even though they don't like it, they support Bill. He spends money on matching clothes, uses his off days for practice, and performs with the group. Hank gets worried when Bill says he used up all his off days and money. Bill leaves work early for a Harmonaholics show in Dallas, ignoring a warning about General Murray's visit. When Bill's boss tells the guys that Bill is missing and might face trouble, Hank gets angry and decides to find him. They all reach the TV station in Dallas, where they find Bill before the performance. Bill refuses to leave the group despite insults from Dale. Hank convinces Bill that the Harmonaholics haven't sacrificed for him, yet he sacrificed a lot, leading to Bill leaving the group. At the end of the episode, he returns to the base in time for the general's visit and learns that the officer will not get his hair cut by anyone but him, realizing his true purpose. And season 10 kicks off with Hank and Bill seeing Dale and Boomhauer sneaking off for a trip. Feeling left out, Hank suggests they all go to Corpus Christi together, hoping to make their friendship stronger. However, during the road trip, the guys get lost, eventually making it to the beach. Hank realizes that they're avoiding him. Peggy advises Hank to let the guys take charge to fix things. Bobby spends food money on a metal detector. On a boat, the guys reveal they're on a treasure hunt, but they all jump in the sea and get stranded. They all start revealing secrets. Dale reveals they faked their happiness and they all argued without Hank. They start a fire for attention and are rescued by a helicopter. The episode ends with the guys admitting Hank's role in their survival, and they plan to get something to eat. At career day, Bobby ends up job shadowing Peter Sterling. He owns a business that cleans animal waste and porta potties. Hank initially rejects Bobby to work for such a business, but soon starts enjoying the job and even considers starting his own vomit cleaning service. After witnessing Peter being roughed up, Bobby decides not to pursue the business. Hank is concerned about Bobby, but he gets relieved when he finds that out. At the end of the episode, Hank thanks Bobby for reconsidering and for visiting Peter in the hospital. In the following episode, Hank wants to improve Strickland Propane, but Buck is sad about not finding a date. They go to a car wash event to cheer up Buck. Meanwhile, Con and Min want to get rich quickly. They buy a car wash business called Scrubbies using a loan. Con messes up managing it and the business is in trouble. Buck decides to save it by becoming the main owner, and Hank has to work there. Although this business looks more like they're cooking meth in the back than washing cars. Con thinks he's the boss, but things go wrong. The guys help fix the car wash and it gets better. Con accuses Hank of stealing money, and Hank decides he's done. Hank threatens to quit, so Buck sells his share to someone else. Now, Con works for the new owner, and Hank stays at Strickland Propane. Meanwhile, Peggy uses caller ID to find out why Nancy is avoiding her. It turns out Nancy just had Peggy's sweater. Peggy and Bobby end up hiding in the Gribble closet during a phone call, realizing it was all about a silly reason. At the end of the episode, Peggy gets up and states that she actually came back to get the sweater. In our Propane People episode, Buck Strickland owns a propane business but gets banned from a strip club. To make his propane shop more exciting, he introduces fun activities like costumes and sleepovers. However, this affects the business, making employees unhappy. Hank tries to bring focus back to selling propane. Meanwhile, Peggy uses her employee ID card to gain freebies at places like the movies and restaurants, pretending to review them. Later, Hank realizes Buck's changes increased profits because Buck stopped spending money at the strip club. Hank makes up with the strip club owner, allowing Buck to return. The episode concludes when they discard the fun stuff, understanding that running a proper business can be enjoyable. Moving on to the next episode, Bobby and Joseph want to be cool, so they get jobs holding signs for a real estate company. But when kids make fun of them, they meet a group of beggars who teach them how to beg for money. Bobby becomes part of Derek's group, Beggar Cool, and starts using his charm to get what he wants. Hank, upset with Bobby begging, teaches him the value of earning money and not depending on others. Hank makes Bobby return the money he begged for and get a real job. Bobby ends up advertising for a doctor who does vasectomies. When Bobby sees the beggars spending money on unnecessary things, he exposes them, and Hank stands up to them, making them leave the block. The episode ends with Spongy, a genuine homeless man, getting his begging spot back. In Hank's bully episode, Hank has new neighbors, Jim and Leela, and their son, Caleb, is causing trouble for him. Caleb teases Hank and rides his bike on Hank's lawn. When Hank complains, Caleb's parents don't take it seriously. Hank asks Bobby to help teach Caleb a lesson. Bobby imitates Caleb's behavior, causing problems for his parents. In the end, Caleb's parents learn about discipline and Bobby wins a taxidermy contest with Peggy's quirky entry involving squirrels. Peggy shows what happens when Ben Franklin's kite is struck by lightning. The squirrel is burned, and this disgusts the judges. The episode concludes as Peggy apologizes for the squirrel, the power in the building shuts off, and Peggy apologizes for that too. Season 11 begins with Peggy going to a clothes exchange and feeling unsure about being feminine. Hank offers to buy her new shoes. Meanwhile, Bobby tries to prank Dale to become the gun club president, but it doesn't work. Peggy finds a store with large-sized shoes and makes Carolyn his friend. Peggy thinks she's a woman, but later finds out Carolyn is a drag queen. Peggy is confused, but Hank helps sort things out, and in the end, Peggy joins a clothes exchange with drag queens, feeling happy about the experience. In this next episode, the Hill family throws a surprise party for their dog Ladybird's birthday. Luann's fiance, Lucky, gives Bobby a big snake named Josh. The snake escapes, causing chaos in the town. Tommy and Rollo, hired to catch the snake, blame Hank for the trouble. The town passes a bill, Bond Measure S, to handle the snake problem. Suspecting fraud, Hank discovers Tommy and Rollo dancing instead of catching the snake. Hank and Dale go into the sewer to hunt for the snake, finding many snakes and rats. Tommy and Rollo try to stop them, fearing exposure. They eventually find and kill the snake to avoid being exposed as frauds. At the end of the episode, Bond Measure S is cancelled and the men go back to their usual activities. In the following episode, Bill feels sad because he doesn't have a son or a legacy. Hank suggests tracing his family history. They plan a big family reunion, but only Bill's cousin Gilbert shows up. Gilbert reveals they are the last Dautrives. Bill decides to make barbecue sauce and gets investment offers. Bobby apologizes and helps Bill. At a tasting event, Gilbert gets upset about selling family recipes. Bill decides not to sell to honor his family name. In the end, Bill decides to pass the family secret to Bobby, even though he's not a Dautrive, so the family name will be remembered. Moving on to the next episode, Hank discovers that Bobby is avoiding a fitness test by playing a video game called Propane, centered around propane. Hank gets upset and talks to the school about the video game class. He meets student teachers who don't treat him well. At work, Buck suggests playing the game to check if they can sue for copyright. Hank discovers the game can be used for good. Meanwhile, Joseph helps Bobby with real-life exercises, and Bobby gets better. Hank gets hooked on the game, ignoring Bobby's achievements. Peggy convinces him to stop playing by pointing out the neglect of their son and the lawn. Eventually, Hank decides to focus on real-life training with Bobby. Peggy embarrasses Hank in the game. The episode ends with Hank and Peggy encouraging Bobby to continue real-life training. Catching up to the next episode, Peggy falls into a tricky contract with Cozy Kitchens while trying to sell a house. She realizes it's a serious commitment and tries to find a way out. The Wasana Song family tricks her into the contract to get out of their own deal with Cozy Kitchens. Peggy, with Dale's help, fakes her death to escape the contract, but they get caught. Surprisingly, the Cozy Kitchens representative agrees to let Peggy go by pretending she also died in the staged explosion. Meanwhile, Dale's made-up identity, Rusty Shackleford, returns. Rusty talks to Dale about the problems caused by using his name and makes Dale sign a form to free him from any future troubles. In the next episode, Bill has to pass an army physical, but he's not fit. Hank and friends set up a makeshift gym to help him. Bill meets an aggressive bodybuilder named Dirk, and under his influence, Bill gains muscle but becomes rude and loses his friends. When Bill hurts himself during a workout, Hank and friends distract the bodybuilders so Bill can get help. Bill's rectum ruptures, delaying his physical for 6 months. Despite losing muscle, Bill and Hank agree it's okay, and the episode ends with Hank helping Bill to take a gentle walk to the mailbox. And season 12 begins with Hank and his friends noticing that Bobby is getting interested in football. They decide to take him to Texas Longhorns versus Nebraska Huskers game to make him like football even more. However, some things happen, like ticket problems and mistaken identities. Bobby still enjoys football despite all the chaos, and Hank is happy about it. Meanwhile, Peggy and Luann watch the game at home. Peggy cheers so loudly that she accidentally breaks their TV. Peggy and Luann go to Megalomart to buy a new one. In the end, Luann likes a fancy TV, but Peggy chooses a simpler one. On a hot day, Bobby and his friends want to go to a water park, but some older teens make it hard for them to use the wave pool. The teens bully Bobby, but he tells the manager, Tim. Bobby pulls up with a total Karen behavior and asks Boomhauer, who used to be a good surfer, for help. Boomhauer tries but fails. In the following episode, with advice from a young fan, Boomhauer tries again and knocks down the teens with a surfboard. Bobby and his friends can finally enjoy the water. Meanwhile, Bill's car has a flat tire. He tries to get help from passing cars, but ends up waving at them. When Hank comes to help, Bill hears about a mysterious person called the Heat Waver on the radio. Bill decides to be that person. He spends days waving at cars and gets a bad sunburn. At the end of the episode, even though Hank tells him to stop, Bill keeps on going. In Death Picks Cotton episode, Hank is excited about building a new shed, but his father, Cotton, ruins his plans. Bobby is upset about not being allowed to go to a restaurant with the adults, and ends up being babysat by Cotton. They visit a restaurant, but it is super chaotic, and Cotton lands in a hospital with severe health issues. Bobby stays with Luann and Lucky, who try parenting. Meanwhile, Dale, Bill, and Boomhauer visit Cotton at the hospital. Hank eventually confronts his feelings about his father. Surprisingly, Cotton survives, leaving Hank with mixed emotions. The completed shed becomes a symbol of both accomplishment and the complexities of Hank's relationship with Cotton. However, Dale, true to his promise to Cotton, destroys the shed. Later, Hank and his neighbors are having dinner, but the meat is tough. They discover a co-op store with better food quality, and Hank joins it. He volunteers and suggests improvements. The co-op faces financial issues, and Hank helps by increasing profits. Megalomart wants to buy the co-op, and members decide to sell. The co-op changes for the worse, and Hank decides to save it. He and Appleseed steal animals. This quickly becomes problematic when Con suspects Hank of hiding the animals, and cows eventually break through the fence. The episode concludes when Con calls the cops. Hank calls for Appleseed and asks him to take the cows somewhere else before the police arrives. In Strangeness on a Train episode, Peggy plans a party on a train for her birthday, but things go wrong. Food gets spoiled, and the train is in a dry area with no alcohol. Peggy, upset, runs to the bathroom, and Hank follows to comfort her. They end up making love. Later, footprints are found, and Peggy and Hank worry about getting in trouble. To avoid it, Hank causes a distraction on the train, and Peggy cleans the footprints. The group gets thrown off the train, but they find a bar and turn it into a disco party, making Peggy's birthday fun. Meanwhile, kids try to find a secret clubhouse. Children head beneath the house where they enjoy a soda and their new secret clubhouse. And the final season starts with Bill getting diabetes after eating too much sugar at an amusement park. Doctor warns him of the risks, but Bill ignores his advice. Doctor reveals that he will lose his legs unless he starts using a wheelchair. Hank and his friends remodel Bill's house thinking his condition is permanent. Bill discovers wheelchair rugby and gets very good at it, gaining confidence. But one night, he's caught walking, losing his friends and the respect. Without his wheelchair, people no longer respect him. Feeling lost, Bill tries to revert to diabetes, but is stopped by Hank and a rugby friend, Thunder. Thunder helps Bill realize he cured himself through diet and exercise. At the end of the episode, Hank and Bill meet up with the rude doctor, and he takes the doctor into a room and starts beating him up. In the episode Square-Footed Monster, after Bill's neighbor Dottie dies, Hank and friends fix up her house to sell it. However, a rich neighbor, Ted, wants to build a huge mansion there to make money. This causes trouble in the neighborhood, so Hank and others try to stop it. The mansion gets built and causes more problems, especially during a storm. To avoid damage, the neighbors tear it down. Ted takes them to court, but they win because of storm damage. Ted then sells the lot for an electrical substantiation, but the guys cleverly make it look like a normal house. Moving on to the next episode, Bobby gets a bad grade in math, and his parents worry. The school is under pressure to pass a government test. They put him in a special class to avoid bad results. Bobby is put in a special needs class to avoid the test. This special class has cool things like no homework and a trip to a theme park, but he ends up in trouble on a theme park ride. Bobby passes the test, but the school fails because of the special class. The principal is suspended, and the coach becomes the new principal. The old principal now sells steaks in the school parking lot. In the following episode, Hank is worried about his boss, Buck Strickland, attending a propane convention because he might behave badly. Meanwhile, Peggy, Hank's wife, wants to join an exclusive group called Platinum Circle. Hank tries to keep Buck out of trouble. However, things get complicated when Buck discovers he has a son he neglected. At the same time, Peggy tries to become a part of the Platinum Circle, a group of influential propane wives. Buck's personal problems result in a drunken and disastrous speech by Hank during the ceremony. Surprisingly, Buck and Peggy work together to manipulate the board deciding Hank's fate. The board, facing potential exposure of their own wrongdoings, agrees to spare Hank. Despite Hank expecting a harsh punishment, the board only scolds him for poor judgment. They also give Hank the Rainbow Blazers, inducting him into the Propane Hall of Flame for his years of good work. Every year, the Mustangs, a rival football team, tease Hank and his friends about winning a game long ago. Hank gets tired of it and challenges them to a rematch. During practice, Bill accidentally breaks Hank's nose. Hank gets plastic surgery to fix his nose. At first, he's scared it might break again, but he overcomes his fear. In the rematch, Hank scores a last-second touchdown and his team wins. A year later, Hank and his friends tease the Mustangs captain at his accounting job, calling him a loser in front of his clients. And in this episode, Cotton Hill, Hank's father, passes away, and Hank has to take care of his will. Cotton's last requests are embarrassing and challenging for Hank. One request involves giving an item to a person named Fatty. Meanwhile, Dale and Bill almost end their friendship over a beer can. However, when Hank needs their help, they make up and decide to honor Cotton's final wish. Cotton's last request is to have his ashes flushed down a specific toilet at a military bar. The bartender is annoyed by such requests. To distract the bartender, Bill starts a debate about the toughest war. Hank takes his chance to flush the ashes, despite the inconvenience and the $300 bill. Hank also reflects on the importance of Cotton's many friends. And in the next episode, Hank worries about Bobby's baseball coach praising him too much, thinking it might create false expectations. Surprisingly, the coach's approach improves Bobby's skills. However, when the coach criticizes Hank, he becomes upset. A mistake during practice leads to Hank being banned from the Little League. During a game, Bobby struggles and the opposing team mocks him. Feeling defeated, Bobby wants to leave the game, but the coach refuses to give up on him. After another fly ball is heading towards Bobby, Hank, who is hiding in the bushes, grabs Bobby over the fence before the ball reaches him. In the end, Hank reassures Bobby that he is great at other stuff like video games and comedy. In the final episode, Peggy goes out for the evening, leaving Hank and Bobby alone. They go to a steakhouse where Bobby impresses the coach of a meat examination team. Bobby joins the team, HCJC, and despite doing well initially, he makes a mistake in the final competition. His teammates lose confidence and Bobby wants to quit, but Hank encourages him to continue. The team bus is hijacked by rivals and Bobby initially quits but changes his mind after a surprise gift from Peggy. Despite his teammates' lack of faith in him, Bobby correctly identifies a flaw in a cut of meat that all the others had missed, winning the championship for HCJC. After the competition, Hank and Bobby bond over grilling, hosting a cookout for neighbors. The episode ends with Bobby picking up the last steak and commenting on how this is the last one, but Hank assures him that he will be grilling his whole life. Bobby and Hank agree with a mutual yep and continue grilling. And this concludes the last episode of the show and thus our video. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like and subscribe to our channel for more awesome tunes like this recapped on your feed. As always, thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next one.